May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts always be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. When we think about scientists, we often think about the things that they discover or the things that we want them to discover. We want scientists to work on real problems that we have to make the world a better place. We want them to be able to discover things about how cancer works so that we can cure it. We want them to discover things about how we make energy so we can make it more cleanly and make it so that it lasts longer for us. We want them to discover things about how our minds work so that we can find ourselves in better and happier places. And so scientists do a lot of observation, they do a lot of testing, and they do a lot of discovering. But I would argue that one of the more important things, or just as important a thing that scientists do, is they give us labels for things. And we don't always get those labels or understand them, but scientists often, in fact, as much as they discover new things, they publish papers giving us definitions for things we already kind of knew in ourselves already. And so they talk about giving terminology or taxonomy to things that we already could see about the world. But they do so in such a way that discovery becomes possible later on, because you can't discover something about the world unless you've already figured out a way to treat it as though it is a problem that you can change variables in. And that's what that defining process for a scientist is about. It's about defining the variables so that one can go in and change them one at a time to discover new stuff and to make progress. Well, one of the things that I've been struck with in the area of neuroscience, one of the very first things that they did was they talked about there are two ways that we take in new information and make it our own. They give us these two terms, and you could call them whatever you like later, but you'll get the picture. When scientists talk about things that you learn just by hearing them or reading them, they call that declarative knowledge. That there are some things we just take in because we read it in the paper or we saw it on the television or somebody told us about it. And we learn a new piece of information. We might learn that there's this thing called kindness, and we might learn that there are kind people by reading about them. But it doesn't turn us into a kind person, which is why we need the second category of learning, which is what they call procedural. And those are the things that we learn by doing them over and over and over again. And so we need both of these. We need to be able to take things in by reading and seeing and hearing through our senses, and we need to be able to make things our own by acting them out in our body. And nothing that we do really is without both types of learning. And in fact, we all know people that have one type of learning or another in an area, and it's frustrating. If all they have is declarative knowledge, we call them know-it-alls. And if all they have is like embodied knowledge, they're useless to teach another person how to do the thing they know. And so if you don't have both, you are deficient in some manner. Even things that we think are completely mental, like doing math, require that people go out into the physical world and see how items and objects in the physical world interact with one another so that they know how to pull a math problem apart. Or even something as physical like hitting a baseball. If you talk to any professional hitter, they have to go and get the declarative knowledge by watching tape so they can embody that knowledge in taking batting practice. We have to do both things to perfect the things that we know. They have to be declared to us, and we have to declare them. And they have to be shown how to do them, and we have to do them. I think that is what Jesus is doing this morning, even though he never heard the terms declarative knowledge or procedural knowledge. He just knew this, and he wants to teach Peter how to be a disciple. And so he makes him declare, and then he makes him act. So he starts by saying, Peter, he just asked him a simple question. Well, it seems simple. Do you love me more than these? This is this declarative part. And the these here is very ambiguous, and I'm not sure what's going on. There are one or two options about what is going on here. One is we just don't understand what John is referring to with these. And if you want a Sunday afternoon nap-inducing reading, I tell you to go find a commentary on what does these refer to when Jesus says, "Do you love me more than these?" Because there have been hundreds and hundreds of pages and gallons of ink spilled on what these refers to, because Jesus doesn't say. He just says, "Do you love me more than these?" I mean, people say like, well, he means, do you love me more than these other disciples? I guess that could be. Do you like me better than your friends? That seems awfully petty of Jesus. Sometimes people say that, do you love me more than these, your fishing gear? Are you willing to give up this fishing that you've gone back to come and, as he asked him at the end, to follow me? But it doesn't say, in fact, I wonder if he's asking him, do you love me more than this fish I just cooked on this fire? Which actually might be the hardest one to answer if it were me. And in fact, there are many people in my life, I hope they never ask me if I love them more than Friday night fish fry, because I don't want to have to answer them. So, what is Jesus saying? Well, whatever it is, we don't know. It could just be that John, and I just got to tell you, his grammar is a little suspect in places anyway in Greek. It's not his first language. Maybe he just forgot to put his referent in. But I think it's just there because these is anything else that might compete with Jesus. Whether it be the disciples, your friends, whether it be the life that you had before and the old habits that you fall into, or whether it be something as simple as good cooked fish. If you answer, yes, you love those things more than you love Jesus at any point, you already are starting at a place where you are behind the 8 ball. So no matter what Jesus is referring to, there is really only one answer that Peter needs to be able to declare to give. And he says, yes, Lord, you know that I do. Declarative learning is over, at least for a time. Now procedural learning begins. Feed my sheep. And then Jesus, like any good teacher, does it again. In fact, one of the things that we know about teaching is you can't teach something if you only do it once for a person. And people don't learn things if they only hear it once. And so Jesus does it again and again and again. 3 times, Jesus asked Peter basically the same question. And Peter gives increasingly strong answers and declarations. And each time, Jesus gives a verb in the imperative to do something to the flock that Jesus is taking care of. Because Jesus, as he's already done in the Gospel of John, has declared himself to be the Good Shepherd. And so Peter has got to figure out what it means to go out and take care of these sheep. And my guess is as Peter has to start to answer this question for himself, he looks to what Jesus had done in his ministry as a good shepherd. As he had touched lepers, as he'd healed blind people, as he'd fed people on a hillside, as he had taught people that they are blessed, those are all of the good attributes of the good shepherd. And Peter is going to need to learn how to do those things if he really is going to be fully and wholly Jesus' disciple. Because it's not enough for him to declare that he loves Jesus more than anything else that Jesus could put up against him. He must learn to act in the way that Jesus acted, by washing other people's feet, and by letting himself be arrested and put on a cross. Those are the behaviors that add to the procedural learning of faith. And Peter is our template this morning. In fact, Peter is here giving us, in fact, I know some of you know this, this is the moment where Peter is singled out by many Christian traditions as the disciple par excellence. One that we are supposed to learn from, mostly because he is more like us than we are like Jesus. Because Peter has denied Jesus 3 times, and now he declares his love for him 3 times. And we'll get to embody it. And it's very easy for us, like Peter. In fact, my guess is if Jesus was here this morning and he asked you, do you love me more than these? You, of course, would say, yes, I do. But I think he would come back and he would say, act like it then. Don't just tell me you love me, because that's not knowledge. That's not owning it. That's not being a disciple. Saying that one loves Jesus is only, and maybe it's not even this much, half the picture. Because the other part is what you do with your body. The other part is after you watch the tape of how to be like Jesus by reading his Gospels and absorbing his word, that you go out and act like Jesus and tend his sheep and feed him and find ways that you wash people's feet and you act in ministries of healing and you feed people that have no food and are in the desert and you offer that blessing from the teaching that you've received from Jesus yourself. And friends, there are a lot of sheep out there to tend and to feed. Do you love me? Yes. Well, tend my sheep. Amen.